EA Games.
Challenge everything.
Before I start this video off, I just wanted to get something off my chest because I managed to twist my balls in the wrong fucking direction. So OBS is great for recording and everything, I'm not denying that, but when you're dealing with an old-ass game such as this one, it can be a real pain in the ass to set up things properly. And because this game runs at such a low resolution compared to what we have today, it runs at 1280 by 1024, all of my recordings were initially coming out all fucky looking, and the game was like taking up half the screen. And until I managed to set it up properly, it was really fucking annoying. And you know, like me being an idiot was the major contributing factor, I'll admit, but you know, after making this video, I can say that I came out a bit wiser and more knowledgeable. But man, like OBS, like please, next time you decide to fuck me over like that, at least, you know, like take me out to dinner first, like give me a little slap on the ass or something, like give me some warning before you slide it in. Okay, I feel better now, let's get on with the video. The game I want to talk about here is one from a bygone era in the Need for Speed franchise. It was released back in what is regarded by so many people as the golden age of the whole series. It came out at just the right time in the early 2000s around the Fast and Furious movies, and managed to help get a whole generation of kids interested in cars. The game had a story just as cheesy as the ones in the films that myself and so many others grew up with. All the cars and their customization, as well as the way every character speaks in the game, all just scream early 2000s culture. That's why it's remembered so fondly by so many people who grew up with the game. It's a time capsule of a period when everything was a lot simpler and a bit more carefree. And a lot of people, including myself, see this game as their favorite in the series. So from underglow neon to roof scoops, window tints to spinners, turbos to nitrous, I'm here to talk about what made this game so special and why to this day people still want a remake of it. I'm here to talk about what it felt like to play Need for Speed Underground 2. As I mentioned in my previous video, a lot of the games from this period in the early 2000s can be experienced more than once. And this game is no exception, but not for the reasons you might think. Let me explain what I mean. The point I made in my last video was that Vice City can be experienced numerous times. You know, once as a kid when you're just driving around having fun, and then once again once you grow up and you play the game for the story and get your whole nostalgic experience. The difference with this Need for Speed game is that it isn't really fondly remembered because of its story. Like, hell, I'd bet my left nut that the majority of the people watching this video right now who played the game didn't even know what the story was back then, you know, like let alone remember it today. So usually you don't really play these older Need for Speed games for the story. Like, sure, it would be nice if they had one, like a good story for example with Most Wanted, but in general you're here for the gameplay. Instead, what I mean by saying that this game can be experienced more than once is the fact that this game is a time capsule of an era of car culture which is long gone now. Playing this game today instantly takes you back 15 years to the mid-2000s, and I remember the excitement of playing this game when I was a kid. When I played it, it was as if I was transported into this Fast and Furious world. Customizing my cars felt like I got to do what Exhibit and the West Coast Customs guys did on Pimp My Ride, and like, holy shit, the customization in this game is fucking wild. In my opinion, it's straight up unmatched to this day, but I'll talk about that more later on in the video. And watching all these movies and shows left me wanting more, and this game was right there to offer me what I needed. A big titty goth... okay, just kidding. Coming back all these years later, the nostalgia hit me hard, but I appreciated the game a bit differently this time round. Now that I'm older, I paid attention to all the little automotive details. So from being able to download with my car, to hearing the blow-off valve of the turbo, or just simply hearing the exhaust note change when I upgrade my engine. All of these things completely went over my head in my initial playthroughs as a kid. And hell, I'll admit, it's a whole new experience and it genuinely made me appreciate the game even more after I replayed it for this video. I'll try my best to cover both of these aspects of the game, you know, like the whole childhood experience and then the experience you can have once you play it once you're older. So yeah, just sit back, get comfortable, grab your dicks firmly, and let's begin. I wanted to start off by telling a little story of how I found out about this game. It all happened after my parents bought our first computer, and I was still super young at the time. I was probably, I'd say, first or second grade in primary school, and I was super excited to play games on this new machine. But the problem was that I only had like fucking 2 games, like Pinball and Solitaire, and it was a big fucking letdown for me, and it wasn't even close to what I was imagining that my experience would be. It was like a major blue ball moment for me. Back when I was a little kid, I used to get my parents to buy me these epic gamer magazines, and I didn't really give a shit about the actual magazines themselves. What I cared for was the fact that those magazines had a demo of a game attached to the back of them. And I can imagine that some of you know where this is going, but one of those demos that I got from those magazines was of Need for Speed Underground 2. And the map of the demo was limited to Beacon Hill only, which is a quarter of the full map, and it had a few races, but I just remember driving Rachel's 350Z in that demo and I was immediately hooked on the game. And from that point onwards, I just could not wait to get my hands on the full game, and that's probably why, in my case, Underground 2 is my favorite Need for Speed game, because it was the first Need for Speed game I ever played.
I'm broke as shit. I have a judgment against me from some bitch down there in Florida
who wants her car back.
Underground 2 and the game after that, Need for Speed Most Wanted, both have this tendency of starting off with all the good cars. And as a kid it felt so good getting to drive all these fast cars. And that's why Rachel's 350Z is so iconic, because it's the first car you get to drive in the game. And the cool part about Underground 2 is the fact that Rachel tells you to get her car to her, but you're given the option to do races on your way there. And you better believe that little me did all the races, because I knew I was gonna have to give this car up, and I just really didn't want to.
Hey man, I want my car back. You better haul over here ASAP or I'm putting the word out on you. And that means no more racing till I say so. Get over here, now.
And yeah, Rachel understandably does get more and more upset with you the more time you spend with her car doing races, until she just kinda gives it the equivalent of the Navy SEAL copy pasta and is like, listen here you little shit, give me my fucking car back. And as a kid it was super funny being able to hear her all pissed off. You drop off the car and then you get to select a starter car, and trust me, they're all bad. But that's what was so cool about it though. That feeling of starting off with a high-end car in the game and then being brought down to the dogshit level starter cars gave you something to strive towards. Because you've already driven the fast cars, you can't wait to get back in them. Need for Speed Underground 2 has a pretty standard variety of race events in the game, but some races, however, are less annoying to do than others. I've yet to meet a single person to say that they enjoyed circuit racing, and that shit is the most boring thing ever when you compare it to the simplicity of a sprint event, a drag, or a drift. And I can still remember that shit feeling when you start a circuit race only to see that it has 3 laps. This is made even more shit by the fact that the game's progression races are the Underground Racing League, which are a couple of circuit races chained together, and it's just mind-numbingly boring. The redeeming quality of these events was that they were on a track with not that many sharp turns and there was no traffic on it. But I feel as if the circuit events in general are just boring throughout the Need for Speed franchise. And while I'm on this topic, I just wanted to point out how frustrating it felt if you crashed or spun out at the last lap. It just added insult to injury, and just the thought of having to do the race again from the start made me want to fucking off myself. And yeah, I get that they're an integral part of the game, and I don't want to see them gone at all, but all I'm saying is that they're just kinda boring and that they can be just dog shit at times. The game also has these so-called outrun races, and I'll explain what they are. So while exploring the map, you can race other NPC drivers on the streets, and if you beat enough of them in a row, you get a spicy little unlock. And these unlocks can range from performance parts to like the ugliest fucking visual customization changes by today's standards. But back then little me saw these visual upgrades as the coolest shit ever, and you couldn't get them any other way, so they were like kind of a bragging right. As kids, when we would do races, we'd basically just step on the gas and not let off. The way we saw it back then, using the brakes was for pussies. And the way the game was designed, it allowed for a bunch of cheesy tactics. The most famous one was just wall riding every turn. You'd lose less speed and it did all the braking for you. It felt like you were in a little roller coaster because your car drove like it was on rails and it felt awesome at the time. And I still found myself doing it during my playthrough for this video. Additionally, all the other NPC drivers in the game were all pretty much brain dead to say the least, and they'd have only one goal in mind, just get to the finish line. Half of them would just run into each other and crash out just at the start of the race. Couple this with the way the game does its physics, and it allows for one other cheesy tactic. If someone was in front of me, I would just rev up to their rear tire and push into them, and that would spin them out 9 times out of 10. And when little me discovered this, I set it as a goal to perfect this one shit maneuver until it got to the point where I could pull it off without a hitch. And I felt like the slickest motherfucker out there. All of a sudden being overtaken didn't mean shit because I could rely on this one trick. I almost forgot to mention that this game also has SUV racing. They're entirely optional and you don't have to do them. So if you decided to take an SUV from the car lot, you had all these special events where you would race other SUVs. I did it only once as a kid and I didn't really like it, but yeah, it's a thing, so I'm just mentioning it. A thing that all these older Need for Speed games have in common is the feeling of progression. As I mentioned before, they start you off with the good shit, the nice cars. They give you a taste of what's to come, but then they take it all away and the next thing you know, you're behind the wheel of a slow piece of shit car. But that was the appeal of it. Underground 2 does its progression phenomenally well. You start off with the bare minimum and build up to having a full fleet of cars, each one faster than the one before. And alongside this, the game staggers the content it provides to you. What I mean by that is once you start feeling comfortable with your ride and the part of the city you have unlocked, it progresses to the next bit, just at the right time. You start facing faster and newer cars, and that's the game's way of giving you the hint, hey dipshit, time to go to the car lot. And speaking of car lots, you unlock new cars after passing those Underground Racing League events that I mentioned before in the video. And I remember as a kid, after each one of them, I would go and check what I had unlocked, and I can still remember that feeling of excitement of driving up to the car lots. And that's the thing, the newer Need for Speed games are gonna start you off with shit like a Mustang or a Camaro. But in Need for Speed Underground 2, you started off with stuff like a Ford Focus and a Civic. But that's the thing, the cars back then felt way more real. They weren't any Lamborghinis or Ferraris. They were all cars that you can see on the street when you went outside. And the game epitomizes the whole build it, don't buy it mentality. You got to build up your shit car into something that could do 300 km an hour easy, and it felt fucking awesome. Also, the way the game did its performance upgrades was simple enough for a dumbass little kid like me to understand. You could upgrade everything, your engine, transmission, suspension, ECU, whatever. And all of them had packages, kind of like tiers. And back then I would just look at what package increases the little bar at the bottom of my screen for my top speed, and basically whichever package added the most interest to my penis would be the one I'd install. That was the mentality I had. But looking back at it now, each package of upgrades is really detailed, from installing new headers to camshafts to flywheels. All of this shit was completely overlooked by me as a kid, but from my present day perspective, it's really cool that they went the extra mile to add all of these things in. As opposed to the first Underground game, Underground 2 brought something entirely new to the table, free roam. And it's basically what it says on the tin. You got to explore the city where the races are set in your own time. And I swear to God, I've driven around Bayview so many times that I understand why people say that they know some video game cities better than the real life cities that they're from. Each area feels compact and diverse enough that they're just fun to drive through. And in addition, the devs have placed little hidden races here and there that aren't really shown on the minimap. And finding those races as a kid was the equivalent of discovering some hidden treasure. It was a nice mechanic to reward exploration, and I loved it as a kid. And you know, speaking of rewards, the game had a very cool way of granting you nitrous oxide. You can get it in a number of ways, from power sliding to hydraulics to doing donuts. But as you can imagine, these aren't really things you can do in a race. They're mostly free roam oriented. There is however another way, which was and still is my personal favorite. Near misses with traffic cars. I would go out of my way just to drive mere centimeters away from incoming traffic by swerving left and right. It felt so awesome, and it added this risk-reward system to the game that kept you on the edge of your seat throughout the whole race. And seeing my nitrous bottle overfill and change color from blue to light blue felt so addicting. And yeah, it does go without saying that I fucked up entire races by crashing into traffic while still trying to get my little child boner adrenaline rush from it. But crashing into traffic itself in this game is so over-exaggerated. The traffic cars themselves feel like they don't have any weight to them, and it's almost as if you ran into a shopping trolley. Looking back at it now, it's hilarious how over the top it was, but back then it felt genuinely horrible, especially when you lost a race because of it. Going back to the nitrous topic for a second here, to top it all off, all the excess nitrous you got was like a bomb, just waiting to explode. And getting onto a straight bit of track, and holding down the nitrous button, and seeing the screen go all blurry, the fire at the exhaust tip and the smearing of your rear lights felt like you were going at hyperspeed. And that was like some Millennium Falcon shit, straight out of Star Wars. The acceleration feels so good to this day, and as a kid it was the closest my prepubescent ass came to busting the fattest nut. I kinda wanna give a little analogy of how it felt. Doing a race and having an overfilled nitrous tank felt like you were jerking off, but you were constantly holding off from busting your load, if that makes sense. You're kinda like teasing yourself a bit. I've had cases where I would get past right towards the end of a race, but then my metaphorical load would get busted all over the other driver's face when I would use my nitrous to pass them back just before the finish line and I would win the race. I cannot overstate how good that feels, and it's a feeling no other Need for Speed game has quite managed to reproduce to this day. The game also had these events marked with a little star on the map. the so-called special events. In essence, you just had to drive from one part of the city to another within a given time limit. It sounds simple enough, but as a kid I really fucking hated these events, especially the later ones in the game because some of them could get quite hard. My driving skill and coordination in general were so bad back then that I would always freak the fuck out anytime I would crash out and I could still see the timer ticking down. I don't remember actually failing any of these events, apart from maybe a few ones here and there, but they definitely had the potential of tensing up your asshole. The feeling I got from almost failing them was on par with the fear of losing your drift points or totaling your car in a drag race. And now for the part that all of you knew was coming, I intentionally left the best for last. Underground 2 has some of the craziest customization out there. And to give those who don't know a quick rundown, you can visually modify your car in 3 unique ways in Underground 2. The first one is body customization. That means all your spoilers, bumpers, wheels, etc. Secondly, we have paint. There you can change the color of your car and add vinyls. And finally, you have your specialty parts. That's your neon, hydraulics, window tints, and all of that. Each one of these aspects of visual customization are so over the top, and the majority of the parts look hideous by today's standards. But for little me back then, it was like a wet dream. It felt so awesome having so many customization options at my disposal. And like with everything in this game, they were all drip fed to you as you progressed in the story, and that made unlocking new bumpers, for example, feel even more special. The game also had a star rating associated to your car, ranging from 0 to 10 stars. And to progress the story, not only did you have to do the Underground Racing League events, but you also had to build up your car to say 3 stars, 6, whatever. And this necessity in order to progress the story, coupled with all the horrendous customization options, resulted in some pretty ugly but highly rated cars. But I didn't care, for me they looked cool as shit back then. Starting off with body customization, the initial parts that the game offers you are pretty tame and some actually do look okay-ish, but the further you scroll down the list, the worse it gets. From weird looking spoilers to side mirrors to roof scoops and over the top hoods, looking back at it now, it's so bad that it's actually good. And when I was a kid, however, I'd measure how cool something was on how over the top it was. When painting your car, the game lets you paint everything apart from the brake rotors. I'm not even kidding, from calipers to mirrors to spoilers, your engine bay and your fucking exhaust tip. You can literally paint anything, any color you want. And throw in the fact that you have 4 different types of vinyls, and you can imagine how my already fucked up car from the body shop can get a lot spicier looking. And we're not even done yet, not by a long shot. The final shop, the so-called specialty shop, specializes, haha, pun intended, in adding that final jewel and polish to the bedazzled turd that your car has become. This shop has it all. The blinking underglow neon, spinner wheels, scissor doors, and trunk layouts filled with subwoofers and screens. You cannot get more early 2000s than that. Okay, but in all seriousness though, sure, the game's customization hasn't really aged well in terms of taste. And it doesn't really fuck with the majority of modern day car culture. But I get that. And that wasn't really the point back then. They knew what they were doing. They wanted to deliver a game which had copious amounts of customization. A game where you could literally make your car your own. Not like some of the most recent Need for Speed games where the customization boils down to you picking the color of your Ferrari. I would take Need for Speed Underground 2's customization instead of that any day of the week. And as I said before, the game is a perfect time capsule of an era in car culture that's long gone now. And it manages to capture the feeling of it perfectly. And if you watch some of the older Fast and Furious movies, you'll see cars that look like they came straight out of the Underground series. But in fact, it's the other way around. This game is so fondly remembered by so many people because it gave you the freedom to express yourself. Even if yourself at the time was a 7-year-old boy who just wanted to make the most over-the-top car possible, you could still do that. Driving around and using the hydraulics I installed from the specialty shop still looks absurd to this day, but it felt amazing when I was a kid. The game doesn't also force you to have each one of your cars look overdone. What I did for this playthrough was to have one car I would visually modify fully, usually my starter car, and everything else I would customize to my actual taste, which the game is perfectly happy with you doing. And by doing that, I can actually get some decent-ish looking cars, even by today's standards. Need for Speed Underground 2 has a special place in the Need for Speed games. It was the first game to introduce the open-world free roam mechanic to the franchise, and the customization that it offers is one of the most detailed ones that I've ever seen in the series, if not the most detailed one. And it ramps up everything that the first Underground game had up to 11. Playing the game today, you can surely find things to complain about. And yeah, the map is a bit small, but that's the case with a lot of games from that era. and you can see some rough edges here and there on street corners, and some of the textures do look a bit dated, but that's to be expected from a game which is 16 years old. The car models themselves, however, still look okay-ish by today's standards. And I'll admit, the game can get a bit repetitive if you play it for long periods at a time, and I found that out the hard way playing it for this video. But I also developed a newly found appreciation for some aspects of the game, such as the Street X races or Street Cross. Some people might say, don't meet your childhood heroes, as you will inevitably be disappointed. But this isn't the case here. Not in my opinion. This game still holds up to this very day, and the game's music is so good and it has something for everyone. All the car sounds, like in every other Need for Speed game, sound amazing, and in my opinion, they are the best in the whole business. The nostalgia factor alone of going back to Bayview after all these years was well worth it for me. The game is short enough that you won't get burnt out, and it's a nice little fun experience. Getting to do all the things that I didn't do as a kid, like going to the dyno and tuning my car, and actually having an idea of what I'm doing, shows that this game still has more to offer even after all these years. And because of all of that, this game is still considered to be one of the best games in the Need for Speed franchise, with fans still spamming the "we want a remake of this game" on most Underground 2 videos out there to this very day. It probably holds its place amongst the best, amongst Most Wanted, Carbon, and the original Underground. It's a snapshot of a long gone era, but it also shows what results when you make a game with a certain passion. And that's why this game is one of the best that the early 2000s had to offer. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.